Do you therefore think it is time for us to start looking at how to control our population?
We have passed, in fact, nobody's talking about it. Nobody, by the end, I mean, in the next 20 years or so, we will even double this population. And, you know, with the same type of resources. You know, we are sitting on the keg. That's what Obasanjo said, I think, at the forum a couple of days ago. Yes, you know, it's a major issue, but we are not paying at, you know, that is also typical of Nigeria. Nigerians and our, you know, well, me inclusive, the leaders of this country, we only look at today. Nobody is looking at tomorrow. The whole world is clamping down and saying that they will no longer use petroleum for cars and, you know, for all sorts of things. And we're just sleeping. Nobody, you know, they are planning in the next 30 years, in the next 20 years. Those of us who will be affected, those of us who should be affected, should have started planning 10 years before them. But now, even now, we're not talking about it. You know, we're debating Biafra, we're debating Fulani herdsmen, we're debating very mundane, you know, things.
So the biggest challenge of Nigeria in 57 years is a challenge of leadership. You agree with that?
The biggest problem of Nigeria has always been, I will tell you, one, very bad, poor elites makeup.
You inclusive.
I'm a part of the elites, you know, politicians, soldiers, bankers, businessmen, preachers, you know, the elites in the country, you know, they take 90% of the blame. The elites in the country, 2, religion, 3, oil. So these are the three-pronged evils that have plagued Nigeria from independence. From independence, you will understand that, like every, emerging nation, we did not have national leaders. We had regional champions, Obafemi Awolowo, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Sir Ahmadu Bello, etc., okay? Which is natural, all right? But over the Americans also had that. They had distinctly southern leaders and northern leaders. They did. They even fought a war like we did. But what did they do after that? You know, the population mixed. And, you know, it was driven by commerce. Do you understand? Commerce and enterprise. But this country is driven by religion and politics and greed. So there are there are very, very different issues here. Very, very different issues.
Okay, let me just quickly weigh in. Milk and honey is flowing. And it is the control of the flow that has kept us where we are till today. When the population is not the issue. Population can be converted into an asset if you have good management.
So
leadership is the foundation of our problem. Anything you turn out from the kitchen depends on how the cook, call him chef, was able to mix the condiments. Even if you have the same condiments for 13 cooks, they will come out with different tastes. Do you understand? So all these rubrics, different religions, different cultures, different people, they can be made into veritable assets for a nation that has visionary leadership. How was it that God created man differently? And the world is still there, even though there's pockets of war, violence, because we don't have visionary leadership that could control the entire, fringes. So the critical issue has been leadership. But in our own situation, the leadership quest has always been about who will lord over the distribution of the milk and honey, even if it is dwindling in quantity and quantum. And the more it dwindles, the space conscripts, and the fight over it becomes pernicious. Let me give you a simple example. Dog, if there are not sufficient bones in its kitty, that little one it is eating, if he sees a dog 1 kilometer away, he will leave that bone and back at that one to scare it, so that it will remain at that distance so he can comfortably deal with that bone. But if he had so many bones, he could care less. So leadership is fundamental to the problem we have in this country. We have never had leaders. Let me give you an example. You mentioned Zik, Awo, and Ahmadu Bello. Zik started as Zik of Africa. He was crusading with Nkrumah and co. He came down to Nigeria, was being nationalistic in his outlook. The realities on ground sucked him in. He died an Owella of Onitsha. The realities in Nigeria sucked him in. It was Zik who hammered out the idea that Abuja, or a place, Central, should be the capital of Nigeria. For strategic reason that if there was a war, that Lagos would be vulnerable. He did it with a free mind. But when the movement started, it was politicized.
Zik was a negotiator.
No, what I'm saying, he was strategic in his thinking. Yes. He was not looking at whether, after all, he was not from that geopolitical zone, but he was looking what was strategically good for Nigeria. I don't know whether you are getting my lead. Now, when we are talking about things that happen, even people who are benefiting from what happened will be complaining about the individual who made it happen, even if he had a more egalitarian perspective. So what we are saying is Nigeria needs leadership that is knowledgeable, because our leaders are not trained. They are not knowledgeable. They are in their own little cocoon, ensconced in their own little cocoon of small knowledge. But they want to lord it over the people who... Nigerians have escalated in terms of their knowledge. Go and see what Nigerian citizens are doing abroad.
Doc, let's come down to...
Can we bring in Mr. Okechukwu? Mr. Okechukwu, the question of leadership and whether we have the kind of leadership we need to get us to where we need to get to. Do you think we do? I mean, Dr. Okukwe mentioned three things. He said the elite, religion, and oil have been the bane of Nigeria in these 57 years. Correct. Mr. Nnaji says leadership. He zeroed in on leadership, which can be tied to the elite here, and the fact that they are not knowledgeable enough and not visionary. What's your take?
My take is very simple. The issue of leadership has been a problem throughout history. And if there are no leadership problems, there won't be need for election. And there won't be need for election with tenure. In the case of Nigeria, 4 years. And they also go ahead to say, if you finish the 4 years, if you are re-elected, you do 8 years. So the leadership has been a problem throughout history, all over the countries of the world. But in the instance we are locating in Nigeria today, we are saying we have a president that looked at electricity, for instance, as very important for the growth of our industrial base, for the development of the country, and for the engagement on employment. And he said, what is the matter? And he discovered one, that today we are generating up to 7,000 to 8,000 megawatts of electricity. But we do not have the system to evacuate it. And he looked around the coffers of the treasury of the government, after setting aside what they call recurrence, salaries, overhead, and co., and went out of his way to solicit for a foreign loan of over $4 billion. And he's saying, one, he wants to expand the transmission line so that the electricity that's being generated today from solar, from hydro sources, gas, and other means will be channeled to reach all the nooks and crannies of the country. And this cannot be achieved in a day.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Okechukwu. Are you therefore saying that leadership is improving, or what exactly is your point?
My point is that the present administration is laying a solid foundation to revamp our dilapidated infrastructure. My brother Omoba Doyo Okukwe is talking about restructuring. There are two elements of restructuring. Nobody disagrees with restructuring. we of the APC, we have it in our manifesto, and we also dedicated to that. But Mr. President is saying that first and foremost, if we restructure poverty, the poverty will still grapple the people. Why don't we first, before we go to the second phase, to try to revamp our dilapidated infrastructure, that all the federal and state roads across the country are dilapidated. There's insufficient electricity, there's insufficient water in the system, there is a poor educational network, and there's poor hospitals. So, first and foremost, with the little resource we have on the ground today, the present administration is trying to recover our economy and set up a growth plan. And anybody that now do not want to listen or even look inwards, what they have resorted to is to talk of restructuring as if anybody's against restructuring. Nobody's against restructuring. Otherwise, the Doyo Okugba as a spokesman of the Asian regime, I never heard him throughout the Jonathan administration talk of restructuring with the gusto he's talking today. So, but what we're saying is that we, because of we're constrained by capital, by funds, it seems as if we are being slow. But don't forget that slow and steady wins the race. They say that Nigeria is an artificial contraption, is a geographical contraption. There's no country in the world that is not a geographical contraption. In fact, it was an Austrian envoy 2 centuries ago that used that word geographical expression. And he was talking to an Italian envoy. Today, Italy as a country is still one. The Australian Empire then is now 6 countries. So the country had advanced relatively the way people might not appreciate. As the women of the Catholic Church will sing in their song, they say, count your blessings, name them one by one. Let us not, because of the fault lines of ethnicity, religion, depreciate the gains Nigeria had made as a country. Even the population growth is a plus. And if you look down, as I said earlier, I was visiting a friend in, my brother who lives in, he said he lives in Lagos, but I found him in Ogun State, running his small industry and doing very well. But he calls it Lagos. I said, no, there's a boundary here. I said, whatever I call it, that this is Lagos. So there are a lot happening in the country that we should cheer our country for.